So the season of Advent is actually remarkably heavily structured with respect to what a priest is supposed to talk about in church, and today especially. The first Sunday of Advent is always meant to be spent emphasizing the need to wait and prepare for Jesus. It's reasonable, because that's what Advent means. It means to wait or to prepare. So we are actively preparing for Christmas. That's what the season's all about. And it always kind of amuses me when someone clearly doesn't understand the meaning of the word. Every once in a while, you'll hear something like, prepare for the advent of a new era of human history, which really just means prepare for the preparation of a new era of human history. And once you're there, you're dangerously close to just quoting Spaceballs. So, preparing to move on. All of our readings today somehow involved waiting, watching, preparing, or keeping vigil for Christ. We are always called to be in a state of readiness, and especially when we're this close to Christmas. Soldiers understand this. Soldiers understand the need to be constantly vigilant and ready for anything. As it so happens, the nonfiction book I'm working on right now is Rough Riders by Teddy Roosevelt. I'm on the last chapter, actually. And the book is basically a short autobiography of his time in Cuba, fighting with the Rough Riders in the Spanish-American War of 1898. And it was a very short war. The whole thing was like 5 months. So just to give you a little bit of background, the Rough Riders were a volunteer cavalry unit, which means they were not a part of the regular army. They specifically joined up to fight in that war. So they came from all over. They were ranchers and hunters. A few of them were mercenaries. And more than a couple of them were something called a cow puncher. And he never actually explains what that is. I kind of picture like a boxer, but for farm animals. I know that's probably not what it is, but still. So there's all these Americans coming together, and they wanted to go to war. They wanted action. They wanted glory. They wanted to be a part of history. And Roosevelt, we could learn a thing or two from him, because when recruiting the Rough Riders, he said the same thing to all of them. He made them make him a promise. So he said to all the applicants, if you are accepted and you become part of the regiment, I don't want to hear any complaining out of you, because whether you are in glorious battle or you're guarding the mules, you are a Rough Rider. So you will face danger by bullets, but there is an equal chance that you can die of fever and disease. And you need to face all of that with an equal amount of bravery. And the soldiers kept their word on that. So they go, and they fight. And after 3 days of nonstop fighting, it was actually the most significant battle of the war, not that they knew it at the time, and a ceasefire is called. So the fighting stops. And for several days, there's nothing to do except reinforce the trenches and bring some supplies up to the front lines. It was boring. And soldiers don't like boring. But Roosevelt and the other officers, they knew exactly what to do in that situation, and they constantly told the men, do not get lazy. Do not stop keeping watch. Be vigilant, because the fighting could break out at any minute. Any minute. It could begin again at lunchtime. It could begin at 3 a.m. Because remember, a ceasefire does not mean necessarily the war is over. It's just a pause. The Rough Riders could only relax and lower their guard when the war formally ended and they went home. Until that point, they had to be ready for anything. That illustrates a vital idea that's at work in Advent. To wait or prepare or keep vigil is to believe that something else is going to happen. You have to be open to at least the idea that something else is going to happen. Think about it. When you go to the movie theater, back when we used to do that sort of thing, you would sit down in your seat and you would wait for the previews and for the movie to start. Why? Well, obviously, because you don't want to miss the beginning. But none of you, in all likelihood, do the same thing during the closing credits. Because unless you're really enjoying the music, or there's some kind of secret scene at the very, very end that you're waiting for, when the end credits roll, the movie's over. There's nothing left to see. There is nothing to wait for, and so you go home. I say again, to wait involves the belief that something else is going to happen. There's no point in preparation if it's all over. So apply that to Jesus. We are celebrating the season of Advent. We are actively waiting for Christ. And we do it now before Christmas because it's the easiest time to think that way. It's like we're waiting for Jesus the way Mary and Joseph did for those 9 months or so. But why exactly do we do this? I mean, it's not like we're rewinding time here. The first Christmas, the real one, happened long ago. So why do we do this if it's more than a historical refresher? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. We are Christians, and we hold vigil for Christ because we believe that the history of salvation is not over yet. There is more still to come. Something else is going to happen. We don't know when, we don't know how exactly, and we don't know who the major players will be at the time, but we know that God is not done with us yet, and that there is still work for us to do. Maybe there's a ceasefire every once in a while in this spiritual war, but that is still going on. That war between good and evil has been raging for all of human history. It is not over yet. If it was, like the Rough Riders, we would be on the way home by now. But we're not. We are here. It continues on. And if you think about it, those kneelers are a little bit like our trenches in that spiritual battle. So do not get lazy. Do not get discouraged, and do not retreat. Be ready, be vigilant, and be brave. For Advent is our time to come together in faith and to refresh our vigilance for Christ. For God is most certainly not done with us just yet.